3 of the Ohio Revised Code by the Anderson Township trustees to provide administrative relief to any person or entity adversely affected by the Anderson Township zoning resolution. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Here.
Mr. Halpin?
Here.
Mr. Haber?
Here.
Mr. Graff?
Here.
Mr. Sion?
Here. Thank you for coming to this meeting of the Anderson Township Board of Zoning Appeals. Please be aware that this meeting is audio and videotaped and may be carried live on television. First, I'll outline the procedures. A summary of the appeal is presented by the staff, then the appellant will present its case. The board members may then ask questions of the appellant. After that, all persons supporting the appeal will be permitted to testify, one at a time after being recognized by the chairman. When those persons supporting the appeal are finished, those opposed to the appeal will then be recognized to testify and/or ask questions of the board after being recognized by the chairman. All persons wishing to testify, whether for or against appeal, may only do so after being sworn in. When testifying, each person must come forward to the podium after being recognized, speak into the microphone, and state their name, address, and any affiliation to the case. All persons testifying will be limited to 4 minutes unless a board member requests additional time. All testimony is given to the board only. No comments or questions are to be directed to the appellant or anyone else in the audience. The board will only hear new, non-repetitive evidence or questions. Should someone wish to show support of previous testimony, they may do so by following the testimony procedures and stating their support of previous testimony. Now, all those persons wishing to give testimony, would you please stand, raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
There are not. We need a motion to approve the agenda.
So approved. So moved. So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Any comments, edits on the minutes from last month's meeting? Not here. No one? Do we have a motion to approve last month's minutes?
Were there any revisions that were sent in? None.
No, there were not.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of March 1st, 2018 as published.
I'll second.
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Graff?
Abstain.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Staff ready to present their case for Case 3, 2018 BZA?
Yes.
Please do so.
All right. Good evening, everyone. These are the standards to be considered and whether or not a variance should be approved. So the first case we have tonight is case number 3, 2018 BZA. The applicant is Linda Uchtman, property owner of 7910 Woodruff Road. The location is 7910 Woodruff Road and 7912 Woodruff Road. The parcel number is book 500, page 190, and parcels 97 and 98, which are both zoned B residents. And the request is a variance request to allow 3 properties to have 10 feet of frontage on a public street where 20 feet is permitted per Article 5.5B1 of the Anderson Township zoning resolution. Just a little bit of history about this case. The house at 7910 Woodruff Road was built in 1958, and 7912 was built in 1956. The house at 7912 Woodruff Road was granted a variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals in case 18-2001 BZA to allow a single-story addition in the front yard set back 19 feet from the front yard property line where 35 feet is permitted. In addition, the house at 7912 Woodruff Road was also approved for the following: 2 additions in the rear yard in 2001, multiple additions, a deck, a patio in the rear yard, and interior alterations in 2001, and a pool, a patio, fence, accessory structure in the rear yard in 2012. So here is a map of the properties in question. You can see each of the lots have 15 feet of frontage on Woodruff Road. This is where it has been requested to create a new lot. So this is an aerial map of the property. Again, you can see the 15 feet of frontage on Woodruff Road. This is a topography map of the property, and you can see that both of the properties in question are much larger than the surrounding lots. This is the site plan that the applicant has submitted, so this would be the lot that is created. There are 10 feet of frontage for each lot on Woodruff Road, and a portion of this lot would be given to this lot to create that 10 feet of frontage on Woodruff Road. This is a picture of both driveways from the Woodruff Road. Again, the driveways as you move further onto the property, and then the driveways looking back at Woodruff Road. This is the rear of the house located at 7910 Woodruff Road, and again, another picture of the rear yard. The rear of the house. This is the rear yard of 7910 Woodruff Road, where the new lot would be. And again, this is where the house would be built. This is the existing property line between the two properties. And then this is the neighbor's house at 7912 Woodruff Road, and a picture of that property. So, staff findings, staff is of the opinion that the variance is not substantial since a majority of the surrounding lots are substantially smaller in size than both lots in question. The essential character of the neighborhood would not be altered, and adjoining properties would not suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. The adjoining property owners to the east at 7912 Woodruff Road have written a letter of consent stating that they are in agreement with the proposal. The variance would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. The property owner's predicament cannot be feasibly obviated through some method other than a variance, as there is not enough space between the two lots to put a third. Staff is of the opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed by granting the variance. And again, these are the standards to be considered. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board of staff?
No.
Is there any history between the existing frontage and what is required, such that what is existing, the 15 feet, is substandard to what is required? So is there any history on that? Were they granted a variance back when those lots were originally formed?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. Okay, I'm good for now. Thank you.
Any more questions? No. Seeing none, will the appellant or the appellant's representative please come forward to the podium, state their name, address, and any affiliation to the appeal?
I'm very nervous. My name is Linda Uckman. I live at 7910 Woodruff Road. We would like to get the variance so that our son can build a house on the back part of our lot. We have moved up into Anderson Township about 29 years ago so that our children could go to Anderson schools. My son went to Anderson High School, his wife did also, and they want to move back into Anderson to get their daughter into Anderson Forest Hill schools. Because of the 15 feet of frontage, we have to come here today to ask for the variance to be able to do that. The house that they are going to build is a one-family house. That is all we're going to build back there. It isn't going to be a multiple dwelling. There won't be space for any more houses once that house is built on there. The people next door at 7912 have agreed to go in with us to put the 30 feet together so that we can divide it into the 10 feet lots. I hope that this meeting will explain to everyone and get the confusion out of what everybody maybe has been concerned about, that there would be apartment buildings or multiple dwellings because of the other building project that's going on up Woodruff, that they think that maybe that's what we're talking about, but we're just asking for one house to be able to be built. I don't know much more to say. I understand, what I have been told is that that house, the house that sits in front of us at 7908 was the original house, one of the original houses out there. They gave the lot that our house is built on to their child, and that is who built that, our house, was that. So I don't know how the land was divided at that time to provide for our house to be built. So I don't know anything else to say except that I appreciate everyone hearing us, and I appreciate your consideration for the variance.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Hockman?
Yeah, I have a question. So you're at 7910. When you bought that land, you bought the lot that you're on as well as the land behind it? Correct?
Yes.
When you purchased that
It was
29
2
years
acres,
ago?
about 2 acres. Mhm.
Any other questions? Thank you.
I do have a letter from our neighbor at 7912. He wanted to know if he should give it, that I could give it to you. It is concerning the letter that has been placed in our neighbor's mailboxes concerning this, and that he wanted to make sure that our neighbors knew what was being told was correct, if I can.
Please.
It's up to the board whether they want to review that or not.
Any objections?
None here.
Please, could you get us copies of that, please?
Yeah, sure. We'll make copies of the letter.
If there's nothing further for this witness, you may step down.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anybody? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm a bystander, but I live on the corner of 8 Mile and Woodruff. My daughter will
Excuse me,
be...
ma'am, would you please state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, my name is Carol Hawkins. I live on at 757 8 Mile. I live on the corner of 8 Mile and Woodruff.
Thank you.
My daughter's married to Kevin Uckman, and they will be living in that house. I've seen the plans. It's a wonderful house. The benefit to them living there is that all of us, their parents, will at some point in time be up in age, and them living there next to us would be helpful, living next to Kevin's parents, living next to us, and in the meantime, we'll be there for their children. It's important that you keep in mind that this is just for their family. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know the procedure.
No, you're fine.
Questions?
Seeing no questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, can you restate your name and address?
Carol Hawkins, Hawkins, address 757 8 Mile Road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this appeal? Seeing none, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this appeal? Please step forward. Please state your name, address, and relation to the case.
My name is Frank Cogliano, and I live at 801 Kip Drive with my wife Debbie. just directly right around the corner. First of all, I'd like to thank the Anderson Township Board of Zoning Appeals for the notification regarding the public hearing and this opportunity to speak. This is not a personal issue. It's an objection to the zoning variance, which we feel could have future ramifications that affect 22 adjoining properties in Brittany Acres. We are opposed to the zoning change. Zoning laws were designed to protect the integrity of the neighborhoods. The owners of the 22 homes around the two properties requesting the variance could all be affected if this variance is allowed. We have lived at 801 Kip for 43 years, where we raised our 3 children. Our family owns 4 homes in Anderson Township. After reading the notice of this public hearing from Anderson Township concerning a proposed zoning change to the properties located at 7910 and 7912 Woodruff Road, my wife and I drove over to Dave Kasnecki's home at 7912 Woodford to discuss the variance and to get a better understanding of the request. During our discussion with Dave, he told us that his neighbor at 7910 wanted to build an additional home on the property for their son. However, during that discussion, Dave also mentioned that he and his neighbor at 7910 had discussed possibly building 3 to 4 houses on their combined properties. Whether that is his intention or his neighbor's, it confirmed our major concern. If this variance is allowed, it establishes public street access. By zoning laws, it is our understanding this allows subdivision. It opens the door for further development. This would allow the current owners of any future owners of 7910 and 7912 to subdivide the properties and build additional homes. That is the major concern. Linda Uckman's request to the zoning board states, and I quote, "I talked to John Huth at Hamilton County Zoning, and he said that the 2 homes could combine frontage and in essence create a road for subdivided property if the Anderson Township Zoning Board agreed. As our survey shows, the quote road would be divided to give 10 feet to 7910, 7912, and the new house address to be determined," unquote. A copy of Mrs. Uckman's filed request is attached to the information I will submit to the board tonight. The property at 7910 Woodford Road was previously owned by Harold and Donna Johnson. Harold had intentions to build an apartment building by combining the same 2 lots. When that did not seem feasible, the Johnsons decided to build a home for Donna's mother behind their existing house. The Johnsons requested a variance, and it was denied by the Anderson Township Zoning Board. I believe that denial set a precedent which should be honored today. Residents of Brittany Acres bought our homes for the privacy they provide. Some of the concerns mentioned by my neighbors were related to sewage, potential water problems, and more frequent power outages. It is also my understanding that an underground spring runs through several properties, including the 2 properties involved with this request. At one time, there was a creek in the back of these lots. Many of our neighbors have severe water problems, drainage problems in their yards and basements. One home along the underground spring experienced 5 feet of water in the basement. Future construction could interrupt underground water flow. I know that some of my neighbors attending tonight might not feel comfortable speaking. If possible, I would encourage them to please let the board know their opinion. I believe everybody sitting over here in this particular area is opposed to this variance request. This is their one and only chance to say something, and that's tonight. Again, this is not a personal issue. It's a zoning issue. All our neighbors are good people. If the variance request for these 2 properties is approved, this will allow subdivision by these and/or future owners. It is our intent to discuss with our neighbors, and at this hearing, public matters that have potential to affect our properties, which we feel that it does. My wife and I are grateful to live in Brittany Acres and Anderson Township. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you very much.
Any questions for this witness?
So your concern isn't about the house being built, you're concerned that the future might involve additional housing, is that
It's
what I'm hearing?
the whole thing, to be honest with you, both. The house being built, because it affects us in the same way, it affects the other people that are closest to that house. It's like me building a house in your backyard. We were told when we bought this house, and you can ask any of our other neighbors too, and hopefully they bring that up, that when we bought our house, we wanted to know what could go in back there. And we were told nothing could go back in there because those are unbuildable lots, and that Hamilton County won't allow anything to be built on them. So I'm sure that we've lived there, like I said, 43 years plus, and that's the main reason. I mean, it's very nice, and I have no problem with any of our neighbors. I never have had a problem with any of our neighbors. But when this came up, and just that possibility creates a major problem for us.
So, but I guess my question is that all we're doing is changing or possibly allowing the expansion of the front so they can drive back to that lot. That's,
You're in essence allowing a street to be built there.
okay.
And that's a question that I would have, is if a street is built back there, who pays for that street?
If it's private, they would pay for it. It would
But if
the
it's going to be
township.
designated as a street, I would think that Anderson Township would be
It
responsible
would
for it.
have to be dedicated by the first. I
You would
guess.
have to dedicate it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I'm totally opposed, and my wife is totally opposed to the variance as requested.
The house that's going in, how does that, where does that sit compared to where your house is?
If you have the map, and actually, I can show you on a drawing, but, okay. Pull it back up to the one in the color. It's easier for me, because that's my house up there. That's Kip Drive over here, I think. Down. The one with the swimming pool. That's my house.
Okay, so the property is
The property is two over now.
over to the left.
Correct.
Okay.
But let me just add that whether the people that are on that other street or behind there, they're affected by that house that's put in there, the same way that I would be affected if there's a house put behind there on 7912. So maybe it would be a good idea to ask those individuals how they feel about it. I understand the importance of houses, and it's a nice house. There's also a picture of that house that's in the information that I'm going to
Yeah.
give to you. You have that. That house is much larger. I mean, it's 27, almost 2,800 square feet. It's much larger, and it's going to have a higher footprint than any of the other houses in Brittany Acres. Now, I know that you could argue that point either way. Would that make our houses more valuable or make it less valuable? In my opinion, probably make it less valuable. But I think it'd be important to hear from some of the other people that are talking, see what they're feeling. But I am opposed to it, and my wife is opposed to it. And also, there was something that was mentioned about a letter from Dave. And he had sent something out saying some things that, anyway, you can read his letter. And my wife wants to submit some information as well. Or you had a couple of questions you wanted to ask. I mean, it's her turn, I guess. That's fine. Do you have any other questions? Because, yes, I'm still opposed.
So your concern is that they're going to put a house on that one lot
Yeah,
back there, right around in that area.
right.
And that the people in the lot next door are going to, maybe will develop that to add more housing.
There's a lot of land there, as you can see. Why wasn't it ever developed before? I think some of the questions that I have brought up tonight might be something to ask, because if it was never, basically it's landlocked. I mean, that's really not a street. It's really not, there's no frontage to either of those houses that technically, unless you think there's frontage, but there's really no frontage at all. There's houses that are in front of them all along there. It's a very nice, it's large size piece of property, but there's got to be some other reasons why no one's built back there before. Why wasn't it developed at the time when Brittany Acres was developed? Those are some questions that I would have too. Sorry, I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to take so long is what my point was. This is my information, same thing I just pretty much said. If you want that, I'll give this to this gentleman here. If you don't
Board
want
wish to,
No,
any objections?
No.
don't need it.
You don't want it?
Nope.
We appreciate your testimony, though.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. No further questions for this witness?
No.
Seeing none, is there somebody else who wishes to speak in opposition to this appeal?
My name is Nancy Grimshaw. My husband and I reside at 7929 Asbury Hills Drive. Our main concerns regarding the approval of the zoning variance, possible further subdivision of these two properties. Our main issue is the water drainage issues which currently exist and the likely exacerbation of the water table with the proposed development of additional homes in this area. We're requesting that the Ackmans be required to obtain a geological water survey from Hamilton County zoning to track the underground water table and drainage issues. Attached are pictures of water which pools constantly down the middle and back of our property, which used to drain off. This issue has worsened over the last 10 years. I don't know if the construction of the swimming pool at 7912 contributed to the pressure/pushing of the underground water table, causing the increased water backup at 7929 and 7919 Asbury Hills Drive. Also included are pictures of two spruce trees in our yard, one on higher ground, the other, which used to be in similar health, now being drowned to death by the pooling water. We are currently undergoing $500 treatments to save this magnificent tree. And then what Frank mentioned as far as why were they, was the property deemed unbuildable back when Brittany Acres started, because they deemed back then, was a water table survey ever done back then? I don't believe this to be an unreasonable request. The 13 houses constructed on Forest Acres off Asbury Road backing up to Asbury Hills Drive now cause water to be backed up at 3 houses on Asbury Hills Drive. Specifically, the basement at 8148 Asbury Hills has been flooded and experienced water damage. Forest Acres has only 2 drainage grates, both located closer to Forest Road than to the back of the cul-de-sac. I realize that Anderson Township is a great place to live and the zoning board wants to increase tax revenue as much as possible, but at what expense to the residents who have lived in, paid taxes to, and supported for 25 to 42 plus years. When negligence and greed allow new construction that jeopardizes long-standing structures, it is not unreasonable that due diligence to protect property and investments of current citizens be required. Thank you. And then there are pictures of the water pooling, the damage to the fence. One of the things they mentioned is there's natural underground springs all throughout this area, and it freezes on the streets as it is now. And then pictures of the trees as far as this one used to look like this one. And I think I read somewhere that anything that we wanted to submit had to be done today, so I will leave this with you guys.
Did the board wish to consider the pictures?
I'm really concerned about this late entrance of written documentation without us being able to have reviewed it prior to this evening.
They said it had to be,
So,
like today was our opportunity to do this. So, but they said anything after this meeting, it would not be accepted, so that's why I would like to have it accepted at this time.
So where are you in this picture? Where's your property?
We are at the corner of Asbury Hills and Kip up at the upper right-hand corner.
Up here?
Our property actually doesn't touch theirs, but we have water because of the water table and lack of drainage. This, where Frank was talking about where the creek used to go through, that property, that used to be drainage area for all of this natural spring stuff. So we are actually,
Excuse me, ma'am, I'm going to ask, we're recording this,
Oh, I'm sorry.
and we can't record this testimony without you being in front of the microphone.
sorry.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I want to make sure that your testimony gets on our record here, okay? Thank you. So can you go back and talk about what it is that you were talking about here as far as where your location is?
Our house
So-
is at the corner of Asbury Hills and Kip, in the upper right-hand corner of your
Right
picture,
there?
right there.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I apologize.
That's all right.
for being
It's just that there's
correct.
like the natural creek that Frank was talking about kind of runs kind of all through that area, and the back of 7912 is where a lot of it went to drain, because that's where the creek kind of ended. And there's natural springs. I think when the pool was being put in at 7912, I guess the people that were trying to dig the hole, it kept filling up with water while they were trying to dig it, and they were very exasperated. Because they were like, this is taking us 5 times longer because it keeps filling up with water. And then the person at 8148 Asbury, she showed me pictures of the water drainage issues they've been having because of the stuff that was put in on Forest Acres off Forest.
Okay.
So I think water surveys need to be done before any further development, because just digging a basement, even if it's 2 lots away from, on the second lot away from our house, putting that basement in pushes that water that's underground somewhere. It's like when the swimming pool went in, it pushed that water further back.
Okay. May I restate what I think your objection is your concern about the construction of this house is how it relates to site drainage.
Yes.
Is
Because
there-
there's already drainage problems, and I think that would create more.
Okay,
And I think the topographical map that you guys showed prior, that's more a gradation map, isn't it? It doesn't have anything to do with water. And I think this young lady over here mentioned that a water survey would be would be Hamilton County's thing, not Anderson Township's jurisdiction.
That is correct.
okay.
When I did come in, last week, or to find out, how this worked and whatever, and so that's why I didn't submit the information at that time, because I thought I had today.
Okay.
So the board had the option to accept and review any pictures or documents that you were wanting to submit.
And I would pose too, I understand Mr. Haber's concern about not being able to review it. This also could be a situation where we take everything and then hold off on ruling on the case until next month in order to consider everybody's opinion, if that's acceptable to the board.
Was that the communication to the residents here, was that they had till tonight? Because if that is the case, I would certainly honor that. And then, in accordance with our chairs, that we would then table and actually have time to review that documentation, such that we can include the man's documentation as well.
It was that any testimony had to be given in person.
And I think on the paper, one of the papers that was sent, it said that after this meeting, no documentation would be accepted.
Okay.
So,
It's due to the possibility of them making a decision tonight.
right.
Okay.
Anybody else on the board wish to express an opinion?
I think there are other people that want to speak as well.
We're discussing whether we're going to accept additional documentation. We've heard Mr. Haber. Anybody else have any comments?
I think we should take the documentation and probably table it till next month, and then that way we have plenty of time to review all the testimony.
And I'm in agreement with that as well.
Same here.
That if we take additional documentation, that we reserve the option to thoroughly go through that information and potentially we can leave the public hearing open tonight so that we can come back next month. And that's fine for me. And then the gentleman who I told not to, we can get his information as well.
We can move forward
Okay.
with that, yes.
Okay?
Any objections to that?
Do you want a motion or anything a little more formal about that? Okay, cool.
I think what we'll do, we can accept all the documentation, we'll make copies, and then we can distribute it amongst the board members.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, thank you.
There are no further questions for this witness? Thank you.
We can take that, thank you.
If you want to submit it, then please do.
Does anyone else wish to speak in opposition of this appeal?
Good evening, Board. My name's Brian Eliff. I'm at 7919 Asbury Hills Drive, and it's interesting, I'm also up in the corner from everybody you've heard from this evening. I really don't think, and you'll probably hear for some other neighbors who are more directly impacted, but it's possible we may not have even been here this evening except for the information the Coglianos went to the trouble to gain, which has made some of us nervous that besides just the lot that's clearly shown on your plat and what's before you tonight, that we're all a little worried that this might open the door for future variances or something like that. So that's why you're hearing from some of us who are on the eastern part of the affected area. A couple things I'd like to share with the board and is, first of all, the county rules and the township rules vary on this, what can be developed back there. If we did not have the township panhandle requirement requiring 20 feet, the county rules would allow the property owners to come together as they have submitted on their plat, and with the 3 10-foot panhandle lots, the county subdivision rules would allow up to 5 lots be developed back there. So when you hear discussion about this is creating a public road or this is creating a subdivision, as it sits today, it's not. As it sits today, the county rules would allow up to 5 lots. So right now we see 3. So it's possible based on the zoning there, which I think is B, and that allows about 10,000 square foot lots. Although under your rules, a panhandle lot has to be double that, so they'd have to be about half-acre lots back there. You could have more lots. However, and this was what Brian Snyder down at Development Services told me at the county, he said, well, Anderson Township didn't like our rules, so they adopted more restrictive ones, and that's why you have an opportunity to hear this tonight, which is Anderson Township has 20-foot requirements, and the Uckmans, therefore, are before you requesting a variance. So that's just a little bit of the background. I know a little bit about the township zoning. I had the privilege of serving on the BZA for a number of years, and I'm on the zoning commission now, and I'm just telling you that because I do have a little bit of experience with your zoning resolution. So the thing I really learned this evening, and I would love to hear, and I would request if the board would allow us a couple minutes, is I would really be interested to hear, got a little bit of late information from everybody, but in particular, the Kasanickis aren't even here, they're wonderful neighbors. But what I really came here to learn is what is their position, because you've heard what the Coglianos were told when they took the time to meet with them, and Mr. Kasanicki has replied to that. And I will just observe that we're not given an opportunity to cross-examine him on that information, so we're at a disadvantage as people who are trying to find out about this. Would the board allow Mr. Bowers to read that letter so we know his position? Because I think that would be very helpful for me. And it didn't look like it was that long.
This letter here?
Is that the, yeah, well, what's the one that was just handed to you this
That's
evening
this
by
one.
Mrs. Uckman?
That's this one. Yeah.
I don't know that we need this.
Is that already in the record?
It will be submitted into the record since we've accepted it, and my belief would be made public, too. We can make it available to everybody.
Well,
Yes.
see, I came over to examine the record several days ago so I could be prepared for this meeting, and this is really critical information for me to know whether I want to continue to oppose this or not.
And as we've noted, we'll keep the public hearing open based on the new evidence and new documents that are being submitted, so this will not be closed today. It will be closed possibly next month, depending on...
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, too. I agree with Mrs. Uckman. That would be helpful to hear that.
Well, it is record now.
I'm sorry.
We are taking it for record now.
Yeah, they're asking it to be read.
Read out loud.
Yes.
I mean, it'd take like 2 minutes to do it, right?
Any objections?
I would really appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, Board.
Okay. You are receiving this letter because it has come to my attention from various phone calls and neighbors stopping by my home to talk to me about a letter and a door-to-door canvassing effort concerning a variance hearing about a proposed construction of a single individual home on the lot of 7910 Woodruff Road. Unfortunately, I was not provided the courtesy to review the letter prior to its release, even though my name and property were referenced throughout the document. I am also concerned about the comments that were made to my neighbors during door-to-door canvassing campaign about me and my property. Below, I will address the comments made in the letter, point out the inaccuracies and exaggerations, give you the reasons I am included on this variance request and why I agreed to it. Inaccuracies and exaggerations. 1. The letter stated that I received a variance on my property for an addition that encroached onto the space between my house, my home, and KIP. This is false. I added an addition onto my home which was connected the freestanding garage in the existing house. This addition is actually 6 feet further away from KIP than the existing house. There was no encroachment towards KIP, not even an inch. The variance requested was actually due to the fact that the front of my house is zoned as Woodruff, even though the home was originally constructed where the master bedroom, the side of the home was actually facing Woodruff, the zoned front of my home. Any changes to the master bedroom would require variance because it is still zoned as the front of the home, which has strict guidelines. 2. Debbie Cagliano and her husband stopped by to discuss the proposed addition. At that time, she lamented that the owner of 7910 and my home discussed an apartment complex some 35 years ago. I chuckled and said, I can't see anything happening, maybe a couple homes, but not apartments. I did say, as an aside, that when the current owners of 7910 moved in about 25 years ago, we've talked about the possibility that you could put a couple of homes between the two lots. I then told them that my actual intent with this lot is to eventually remove the overgrown brush and make it more controlled wooded area. Unfortunately, this was not included in the letter. 3. Yes, I did mention expensive homes, the one being built on Woodruff, which have gone through the extensive zoning meetings during the last few years. At no time did I ever talk about multiple homes on the space for 7912 or 7910. Reason for inclusion for variance. When the owners of 7910 approached me about the possibility of bifurcating of their lot to enable their son to build a home, I told them that I have no concerns. Because of the zoning laws, they would need to include a few feet on my driveway in order to pass zoning requirements for this bifurcation. In addition, by zoning laws, it would technically be considered to be a subdivision. Since there would be no change to either driveway, leaving them as is, plus the zoning of this bifurcation would allow a single individual home, I feel it would have a very little impact and agreed to it. Summary. I sincerely apologize to add another letter concerning this variance meeting. It adds another degree of confusion on what should be straightforward request towards a zoning meeting. As stated above, if I was able to review the letter prior to its publication, I could have corrected the inaccuracies. Because my name was attached to these inaccuracies and my statements were taken out of context, I felt the need to respond. Yes, 7910 will be split and the new home will be constructed. The construction of the home is placed in such a way that adding additional homes is impossible. As I told Debbie, her husband, my intent for the property is to create a controlled wooded area. To go further into this, my goal is to create an environment that enhances the habitat for their local wildlife and their sustainability. On a personal note, I have seen the children of 7910 grow from toddlers to very loving parents and successful professionals. The son and his family who would like to build the home next to their parents would be a wonderful addition to the neighborhood. In closing, if you have any concerns, I strongly suggest that you attend the zoning meeting to hear the facts requested. Dave Kasanicki.
Thanks, Brad. And that was very helpful, and thanks, Board, for taking a few minutes to do that. So that helps me understand where Mr. Kasanicki is. It sounded like he did mention potential lots. I don't know how serious he is about it, but certainly if there were to be any more lots built, they would have to be back before this Board to get further variances and reductions in their panhandle. So that does give me some confidence that if you do approve this, it would be pretty difficult to get further variances. Of course, that would be up to the Board. But with that being said, you do have a important criteria of hardships that you are to look at, and one of them is detrimental impact to existing residences, and so that's something you'll have to determine as to the new house and the one lot, if that's going to cause it or not. Certainly I I echo what my neighbors have told you, is we are fearful that if there's further development on 7912, that will make a situation that is tolerable today perhaps quite a bit worse. And I do realize that as a township board, you have limited authority over things like stormwater and runoff. However, if you grant this variance and would perhaps grant further variances, you would be taking on that responsibility, because at this level of division of property, there is not formal review of stormwater runoff. And what our concern is if there is further development, I know this is down the road potentially, hopefully not based on what Mr. Kasanicki says, that we all know that the first thing that happens when you build a new house is what? They build up the foundation 4 or 5 feet, so there's no stormwater runoff that affects the new house. What our concern is, and usually you hear the concern about downstream runoff, we're concerned with blockage of the upstream runoff. That Brittany Acres subdivision, some of you are probably familiar with it, it was built in the 60s, okay? And in the 60s, things like stormwater runoff and detention and retention, nobody had any idea about that. So they just had to make room for it to go somewhere, and it does flow downstream onto 7910 and 7912. So that's our concern, and we appreciate the board hearing that. I do have some conditions that I drafted up. They kind of echo a little bit what Ms. Grimshaw said about being well-versed in the stormwater situation should you go forward to approve this. Granted, it's on the other side of the subdivision from us, but I will proffer those to you, and if it sounds like you're going to continue the hearing, you can take those under advisement. Thank you.
Mr. Eliff, you brought up 2 items. One was and I want to focus so I understand. You talked about this board determining whether or not the addition of a house has a detrimental impact onto the neighborhood.
Yes.
Is it your opinion that if we include this, if we pass this or accept this variance and they build a house that is, not talking water, not talking all the technical stuff, that we can put in conditions like you have in your document, that the addition of this house will have a detrimental impact?
Well, that's a good question, and it's really hard to say for sure, because if we put aside those other things, because you really don't know till it's built and it's there.
Okay.
And that's why this board has a really difficult job to do, is to try and determine, is there going to be a detrimental impact or is there not? Certainly, this subdivision layout, and I don't think these two lots were part of the Brittany Acres subdivision, envisioned larger lots to the rear of most of the houses, and that's what was relied upon, with this subdivision and when people built these houses over time. So, there certainly could be some detriment to that as far as changing the established environment there.
Okay, so let me further my question, and I appreciate your testimony here because you've been on this board, and your qualifications, I can't say enough about. If we included the conditions, and I haven't seen them yet, but if we included the conditions in your letter, would you be in agreement, or would you still maintain your opposition to the variance request?
Well, it would make me feel a lot better, because when you do have a chance to read my conditions, and apologize about just bringing them here tonight.
No problem.
But I know that's what what my conditions do is they would ensure in a very formal way that there would not be further damming up of downstream water flow.
Okay.
So yes, that'd make me feel better about it, yes.
And you talked about making a tolerable situation worse, and that was your reference to the water flow.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I understand you.
As Ms. Grimshaw mentioned, over the years, and we've been in our house about 25 years now, and it's noticeable how the stormwater has backed up ever so much more noticeably over the years. I don't necessarily know the reason for that, but to me, it's really critical that these downstream drainage courses remain clear. That's a big thing for me, okay?
I really thank you.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Do you know if there's been any application process relative to the construction of the house?
There has not, to my
Or is this just
knowledge.
the first step?
They would certainly have to have your approval before they go.
And our approval is specifically to expand the entrance at the Panhandle by 5
I don't
feet,
believe that's it's to reconfigure it, yes.
or to allow it to be used
Yes.
for access.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So really, all we're concerned with is that, and the construction of the house and the water, stormwater issues would be something that would be dealt through the zoning board, wouldn't it?
No, that I would disagree with you. That certainly is your concern, because, as I mentioned, there won't ever be formal subdivision review of a project like this. So when you have a large subdivision, let's say 50 lots, the county engineering staff will go through that closely and make sure there's preserved drainage easements and that sort of thing. But when you have a lot-by-lot basis, it's much more difficult to have an analysis of, well, if you build up this, let's say, third of an acre footprint, and you build that up, what's that going to be blocking, and how's that going to have an upstream impact?
So then construction permits would be likely issued without any stormwater surveys or anything like that required?
I don't think I'd go so far to say there'd be a stormwater survey. No, there wouldn't be anything like that. I think the reviewing officials would have some awareness of that's a potential issue, but I don't believe that they would go to the detail of say a drainage study, for example. And Because there are so many surrounding houses there, it's pretty important in this case.
But who approves the construction of the house? Hamilton County or Anderson Township?
Yes, well, it's kind of a two-step. The township would approve the zoning, which is, looks at things like setbacks, building height, that sort of thing. The county officials then do the building review. They'll look at the construction of the home and that sort of thing.
So there would be no, I guess this is the first hurdle, if you will.
Yes.
And the next hurdle is to get a permit to build the house. And in the process of getting the permit to build the house would be to get a zoning permit, or no?
Yes.
And that permit would involve that body coming in and determining that that land is suitable for construction?
No, they wouldn't go to that. That would go to your staff, to Brad and Sarah, to review that.
From the township standpoint, but the county standpoint, you're saying the county wouldn't probably go to too much length because it's a one-lot issue?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they couldn't. I'm just saying they're going to get a single lot with a single site plan on it. It's not necessarily going to be on their radar how that affects the adjoiners. That's all.
And they don't have public hearings?
No, they don't. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any further questions for this witness? Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition of this appeal?
My name is Richard Woody. I live at 7869 Asbury Hills Drive. I'm the first speaker who adjoins the property that's being subdivided. I'm in the top corner there.
Where's the top corner there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
How's the pointer?
Say the
mark?
address one more time?
Right there. You're right, up to the right there. That
Thank
piece
you.
of property.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay. My wife Martha and I have resided in Anderson Township for 43 years, 42 at 7869 Asbury Hills Drive, which, as I just pointed out, has the proposed property subdivision as its rear boundary. When we purchased our home, as has been previously stated, we were assured the open areas behind our property could not be developed due to zoning regulations. Now we're faced with a proposal to bypass those regulations. We're opposed to granting the variance. This variance will create access to both 7810, 7910 and 7912 Woodruff and their open acreage. The cost of running water, fire hydrants, sanitary and storm sewers, if they're run, to service the single house would seem to be prohibitive. No information was included in the proposal showing the location of the proposed new home or utility access plans. Building a home on the subdivided tract has the potential to create adverse drainage issues. I can tell you that the area immediately behind my lot is very wet anytime there's any substantial rain, and it drains very slowly. I do not personally have any flooding problems. If a house is built there, that water will need to either be diverted toward neighboring properties or preferably will need to be captured and drained to storm sewers. Most of my other comments were covered by others. I basically agree with the others. I'm glad to answer any questions anybody might have.
Any questions for Mr. Woody?
Sir, on what basis were you told that that lot could not be improved?
It was said there was no access to it, that the road the road access was only for two houses and that was it.
Okay. Second question. Water is certainly a factor that's being highly discussed tonight. If we were able to put a condition on this variance that, and I'm just going to, for instance, any stormwater the lot has to be regraded, for example, such that any stormwater or whatever stayed within that lot and didn't shed to other properties, would you support the variance?
I would, as long as we're saying that that is not going to be a street running back there. If that's 3 driveways and 3 driveways only is what we're approving, then I would.
I think that's what's being proposed. It's not a street. Okay? It's part of the, it's part of the private property. So it would not be a,
Okay, so on that basis, no further development can be done back there because you've cut it down to 10 feet for 3 properties as it is. There's no possibility of putting anything back there.
well, one of the conditions we can put on this is we're going to say there's one house back there and that's it.
And that has to restrict 7912 as well because there's no road access to his property either.
I'm not sure we can do that because that person is not here, and there's no variance request.
Then on that basis, I still have an objection to the variance.
Understand.
Okay? 3 driveways only, but that's, the way I see it, it looks like it's turning into a street real fast.
Okay.
So the lay of the land dictates, according to you guys, that the water flows east?
I'm not as expert as some other people.
I'm just trying to figure out, because east is, this is, orientation is north-south.
Right.
So east is to the right of that property.
No.
So,
Yeah, east is to the right, yeah. I believe it probably does flow that way.
Flows east, or?
Behind my property, it doesn't flow, it just sits there.
So where does the water go? I mean, does
I
it
have
go-
no idea, it eventually soaks in, I
Does it go
guess.
north?
There's underground springs throughout that area.
It does?
Okay.
Oh, it flows south,
I have no knowledge of it.
towards
so-
the river?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just checking. Yes, I'm sorry.
Ma'am.
Ma'am, we'll call up, we'll let you stand.
That's,
Any other questions?
I understand the underwater streams, because I have one under my house.
Okay, well, fortunately, they built my house high enough that I haven't had water problems, at least to this point, so.
As long as it's slow and steady, the stream never gets high enough to come.
That's
to the
right,
basement.
yeah, that's it.
If it's a deluge, it comes in. So, I don't have any other questions.
There are no further questions for this witness. Thank you. Do you wish to come forward?
Every time that it freezes, to put down extra salt twice a day for all the water that is dispelled from the sump pumps that make it from their yards into the street. This underground stream, which I've been told in all of these years is what it is, at one time at 810 Kib Drive, my neighbor called me to her house and said, what am I going to do? She opened her basement door, and there was 5 feet of water in her basement. It was not raining. 5 feet of water, and her washer and dryer were tethered to the wall with electric cords floating. This stream, at one time, there was actually a creek at the back of 7912, an above-ground, small creek, but it's always been extremely dry. When the owners at 7912 put in their swimming pool, which was sometime in the last 10 years, they had a really hard time, as Mrs. Grimshaw also said, digging the hole, the builders did. One of the men on the bulldozer said to me, and it smelled atrocious because this was dirt way down, it had been wet for many, many, at least months, if not years. He said, we're having a horrible time digging this pool because this ground is so wet. Since that swimming pool went in, there is a lot more groundwater along Mr. Elliff and the Tredan's yard, my side yard. And I don't know if that's because building the pool diverted that underground stream. So that's how I can add to this, is I've been there a long time, a lot of neighbors have shared with me, and I've been told forever that this was a stream, and I've seen the results of it. And so is Anderson Township with the constant salting of Kip Drive, which just tears our street apart constantly. There are more than 20 neighbors surrounding these 2 lots. And some of them were original buyers over 45 years ago, and some of them are as recent as the last year. But it's more than 20 homes that are impacted. When all of us first bought our homes, before we purchased them, we asked, what is going to happen? What's in this back lot? What's going to go in back there? I was told nothing. I was told this is landlocked property and that there will be no public access to these lots. This is private access only, and the land won't be developed. Well, this variance, to my understanding, makes it possible for this land back here to be subsidized or subdivided in any way that future owners might want to subdivide it. And you've heard from my neighbors and friends how it will affect a lot of people. My husband mentioned that the Johnsons, who are the original owners of the same house that is asking for this variance now, they requested a variance to do the same thing in the exact same spot. And the Anderson Town, I cannot tell you the year, but if I had a way to research it, I would. The Anderson Township Zoning Board denied their request for the variance to build a house in the exact same spot as the proposed new house for the Johnsons' mother-in-law. This is the same couple at one time also proposed joining the lots and putting in an apartment building. But when that was not feasible, like my husband said, then they wanted to put in a house. It was denied by the Anderson Township Zoning Board. So I do have a question that is this a street? Because on the application that was submitted to you by this family, and who I'm happy they're my neighbors, and this is not personal, and it's also not personal to my neighbor at 7910, because this is a zoning issue, and that's why we're here, is we're not yelling at each other over back fences, and I'm very honored to be here and be able to talk to you all, and I thank you. Because the Johnsons were denied a variance, and because Hamilton County and Anderson Township, when Brittany Acres was put in, and when the Johnsons denied their variance, is that not a precedence? Is that not a historical precedence that that land was not to be developed? When if I'm repeating myself, please stop me, but as I said, when all of us bought our homes, or were shopping for our homes, there is a nice lot with a nice wooded backyard, and we're told it's landlocked, they could never develop it. This is over 20 people. So either Hamilton County or Anderson Township Board of Zoning Board at that time possibly misled us home buyers that we were told that this is landlocked, it will not have public access, it only has private access. So over 20 families have been told this, and in my opinion, that's, if it's not true, then it's being misled, or why is it okay to change a zoning ordinance or a variation for one family and not another in the exact same home, and affect all the people who were told that Hamilton County and or Anderson Township deemed this landlocked and unsubdividable? So thank you for hearing me.
Any questions for this witness?
Did you say that when that pool went in that it helped
Oh,
or it hurt?
I believe it's possible. I certainly can't say that, but I can't say for certain. But I believe when the swimming pool went in at 7910, shortly after that, water started backing up into my neighbors' backyards. There's a lot of water, but it's not just runoff. It started backing up. So I believe, because I've known about this stream and seen the underground stream and seen the results of it, is that constructing anything, just digging, which took them a long time because it was just mud, 5-6 feet down. I think that might have diverted that underground stream, which caused additional water in some of my neighbors' yards, and it's a lot of water.
So it hurt?
It hurt, yes, sir.
So just for clarification, we're talking the pool at 7912, correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you. Do you know approximately when the previous variance at 7910 was denied?
It was very shortly before the present homeowners bought their house from the Johnsons, who requested it. So I don't know the year, but they moved shortly after.
Okay, you have any
I-
guess or anything?
I have neighbors who would know more than I would. I'm not
Okay.
really
Okay,
there.
thank
Could I
you.
could I ask,
Well, maybe if she comes up and gives her testimony in which she's going to oppose, then we can ask her that question?
thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I would just add
No,
too,
I
with
was just
regards to
gonna-
the variance, whatever variances were heard in the past, I mean, we do consider them with our cases if they're still within our records.
Right.
But we do consider those variances. We also have to look at the facts and circumstances of the time. We don't know what that case said, so it's not going to have as much impact as it is here, in this case, because we don't, it's not in front of us, we don't have any information or any facts on it. And in this case, it's not for a street, it is for frontage, basically. They're asking for where 20 feet is permitted to be on a road. Basically, the Panhandle lot has 20 feet that can access Woodruff. They're asking for a variance to allow 10 feet instead, so that would allow 3 lots to have 10 feet each. Normally, they would have to have 20 feet each.
Could I ask a question from here?
Please.
Okay. But does that not open up these 2 lots to subdividing? At that point,
At this point, it is, that's, if we
Additional.
approve this variance,
Okay.
hypothetically, if we approve it, then that would be the next step, is they want to subdivide 7110. So that would allow that to be opened up.
and additional future subdivision also?
That's in the future.
Possibly.
We can go into hypotheticals all day long, but if somebody bought 7896, they bought 7908, they've got a whole lot of frontage there on Woodruff, and that's a
Okay.
whole different ballgame. So yes, theoretically, it is possible.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to go on record as objecting to either lot being developed further. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I was just going to answer her question
If you-
about...
If you don't mind, please state your name and your residence.
Marilyn Brennan, 7889 Asbury Hills Drive. My property also is affected, 7889. Just to answer Debbie's question, my aunt, who lived on Woodruff, across the street from the drives that are in question, knew the Johnson family. And when they requested to build the lot for the mother-in-law, it was denied, but that was 35 years ago, at least. And so the Johnsons added what I'll refer to as a mother-in-law suite onto their own house, which is the property as it sits right now at 7910. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in opposition to this appeal? Seeing none, does the appellant wish to address the board again?
I understand all the concerns about the drainage and everything. All I can say is that we will do the best because of building the house itself. We will want the best drainage put back there for that also. Right now, we take the water that sits on our property and divert the water to part of the woods between the 2 properties so that it does run away from the houses and down into the sewer at Woodruff. So all I can say is that we would do our best to prevent any kind of water settling in our houses around that area. Our purpose of this is just to build one home. We can't say what the people will do in the future, but for right now, it will be only 3 houses sharing the 2 driveways, and that is what we're asking the variance for at this time. I appreciate everybody that's come tonight and to hear all of their concerns, and I hope that they will understand that we are concerned about our neighbors too, but our purpose is to do the best we can to make a nice area there. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak in favor of this appeal?
I'm sorry. I'm Joyce Dickinson, and I'm at 770 Strathcona Drive. One thing I'm concerned about now was the drainage, with the storms drainage and all that problem. Because in the back corner of my lot, which is the triangle there at 770, in the very corner there, behind 76 Woodruff, there is a storm drain right there. And whenever there is a real heavy rain and all that, all the rain is coming down from the west side and through the backyards there of 7868 and 7876 and through there and going in that drain. And the people in 7876 at one time, because they had so much water in their backyard, he dug out and put some drainage ditch in there. But it still overflows with a heavy rain and all that. And I'm just concerned whether or not with more construction and if all these underground springs and all that, that there might end up draining into that same one and be too much of an overload for the property.
So you're opposed?
So I would be opposed if that problem, if it wasn't investigated more about the storm drainage.
Any additional questions for this witness? Thank you, ma'am. Does anybody else wish to speak? Please.
Hi, my name's Mark Trudane. I live at 7929 Asbury Hills. Is it possible we could get the topographic map up there? Thank you. It's from, we're at the corner of Kip and Asbury Hills, and to us, it seems to drain, yes, toward Woodruff, but it seems to be kind of a little bit of a pocket or a bowl in there. I just wanted to clarify that it doesn't just run straight to Woodruff. That was my only clarification. So, thank you.
Any questions from the board? Thank you.
Is it appropriate to ask a question?
Sure. If you please state your name, sir, and your address.
My name's Ken Memke at 802 Strathcona Drive. My question is, what type of driveway are they planning to put in here? Do we know that?
We don't know that at this time, sir.
Is it asphalt or concrete or what it is?
That's something that we can ask.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, we don't know that, sir.
We don't know that?
No, sir.
Okay.
All they're asking for is an additional amount of footage so they can put in or use what they have to allow for them to build.
All right. I own the first house on Strathcona Drive 30 years ago, and I'm hopefully that if they're going to give a variance on, that they'd use a concrete to do it, and I think that'd be a long-term solution. So whatever you decide, obviously you're going to decide, and I hope that you folks can sway some opinions and make something like that happen. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak in favor or against this
I just want to, I have one more thing to say. I was under the impression that we are here to talk about the access in.
Yes, we are.
And that was our major focus, and I'm not sure everybody understands that. But I think it needs to be clarified that there is just going to be one house, and that the subdivision worries don't need to be there. There's not, the way their house sits on the lot, there would be no room for anything else, and I think that's important to note. And I've lived lots of places, and we never have a guarantee of what's going to be behind our house. In all honesty, I've lived places where you thought there was going to, I'm sure those people on Woodruff that live there now that are going to have subdivision behind them had no idea that was someday going to be behind them. We just don't have those kind of guarantees. And anybody that, probably the builder gave them that guarantee, and that's just not assured. But I want you to understand that is only for one house, and one house only. I know it's been a beautiful lot to look at, beautiful lot to play in, beautiful lot to see, and it's green space back there. Maybe that might be a concern as well. But I thought our focus was just for the variance for the road. That's it. Questions?
Any questions? Thank you. Last calls?
Good evening. My name is Kevin Uckman. Currently, I reside at 4005 Andorra, which is out in Amelia. So I will be the one building the house, paying for the house. Currently, with the builder, we do not know what kind of driveway. Currently, it's a blacktop driveway. We were told either for like sake of money, it'd be best, since it would be so long, to keep it as a blacktop driveway. But we've also had concerns about the longevity of the driveway if it's blacktop versus concrete. So that is yet to be decided, because right now we're still in such an early stage. We are just asking for the variance to approve the 3 driveways. But this will be our forever home, so that we can, like was stated earlier, we can take care of our parents, my wife's parents, be in a good school district, so that my daughter can have all the opportunities that I was afforded when I was growing up. So at this point, yeah, there's a lot yet to be determined, but really it's just for the access to the 3 driveways. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Uckman? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in regards to this appeal? Seeing none, we will close the hearing for today, but we will keep public comment open until next month.
Okay.
With that, I guess, any further comments from the board?
Can we get a motion to keep the public hearing open?
I move that we keep the public hearing open until next month, when we can make a decision and read all the submissions that have come in.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Nasalevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Havers?
Aye.
Mr. Gurat?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
So we'll move on to our second case tonight.
Staff, please read the summary for case number 4-2018 BZA.
So the applicant for case number 4, 2018 BZA is Matt Klein, property owner of 7621 Forest Road. The property is zoned B residence, and the request is for a variance request to allow 2 existing accessory structures to be located in the front yard, where accessory structures are only permitted in the rear yard, per Article 5.2A7 of the Anderson Township zoning resolution. A little bit of history about this house. It was built in 1941, and it is non-conforming by today's zoning standards. The applicant purchased the home in March of 2017, and in June of 2017, the applicant was granted a variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals in Case 17, 2017 BZA for a second-story addition, which was approved to have a rear yard setback of 31 feet and 8 inches where 35 feet is permitted. In December of 2017, the applicant was approved for a circular asphalt driveway modification. The addition and driveway have both since been completed. Based on Hamilton County Auditor aerial images, there was once an above-ground pool located on the property, which has since been removed, and the 2 accessory structures can be seen prior to 2009. So this is a property map of the property in question. This is one of the accessory structures, and the second accessory structure is not shown in cages on this map. This is an aerial of the property. You can see one of the accessory structures here, and this is the second accessory structure here. This is a topographic map of the property. You can see that one of the accessory structures appear to be on a mound. This is the site plan that the applicant has submitted. You can see both of the accessory structures here and here. So this is the driveway as you move onto the property. This is the driveway asphalt circular modification that was recently completed. This is the first accessory structure, and this is the other accessory structure, and this is both of the accessory structures. Again, another view of the driveway and tape on the property. This is the rear yard of the property. As you can see, it is very small, and that is why the accessory structures are not located in the rear yard. So findings, the staff is of the opinion that the variance is not substantial since the accessory structures have been completed and both structures were well over 20 feet from each property line. The essential character of the neighborhood would not be altered and adjoining properties would not suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. The accessory structures have been repaired by the applicant since his purchase of the property and are not visible from Forest Road. There is also significant landscape buffering between the applicant's property and adjoining neighbors. The variance would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. The owner's predicament cannot feasibly be obviated through some other method other than a variance. Since they are both built prior to purchasing the property, the owner's only option would be to tear down the 2 accessory structures. Staff is of the opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would not be, would be observed by granting the variance based on the shape of the lot, the location of the home on the lot, and the distance from the accessory structure to all adjoining properties. Again, these are the standards to be considered, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff from the board?
Nope. So this came up because of a question related to the structures not being compliant after the purchase was made? This was not brought up prior to the purchase by this homeowner roughly a year ago?
Correct, yes.
I believe this was made based on a complaint.
That is correct.
Any other questions of staff?
I think I saw that the pool that was referenced, that was also been going prior to the new homeowner buying it, is that correct? There was a pool, I think I had something
That I
else.
am not sure of, but the pool has since been removed.
Okay.
Would the appellant please step forward? Speaker, is the appellant here? Are you the appellant?
Yes.
If you please step forward to the podium. Have you been sworn in, sir?
Yes.
Okay. Please state your name, your address, and your relation to this case.
My name is Matt Klein, 7621 Forest Road, and I am asking for the variance.
Okay. You wish to add anything to the staff findings?
Well, the buildings have been there, the newest building is probably around 10 years old. The oldest building is closer to 20. Okay, and when I bought the property, I had to make a decision what to do with them. And I bought the property from Hamilton County. And so I had to make a decision what to do with them, and I thought, you know, they would be nice if they were brought back into good repair and good shape. I mean, one is a child's playhouse. The other one's actually a barn. In fact, I've been told by the previous owner, who's a Hamilton County sheriff, he visited the property, and he told me they had 2 horses back there at one time. Okay, so I decided to fix up the buildings, because if I had kids, I'd love to have a playhouse like that for my kids. And the barn's a great place to keep a drive tractor, because you're going to need that type of tractor to, you know, keep the grass trimmed and whatever. So I fixed them and spent a great deal of money fixing them. I think it's a shame, because actually they're not in my front yard. And I think, not that I want to argue at all, but I think it can be argued that they're actually in the side yard. But that's beside the point. I think the building should stay. There has never been a complaint about those buildings before this time. The complainer doesn't see the buildings from his property. And I don't see any reason to tear them down. I really don't see any reason to tear them down. It's an odd-shaped piece of property, sort of like a peninsula type of property. And I know you all have a very tough job, because you wind up dealing with the previous cases, which are not in, you know, against the current zoning laws. My property, which is weird, you're not going to find it anyplace else. So, you know, I appreciate your consideration in the matter. I know you have a difficult job, but I honestly believe that the buildings enhance the property, they add value to the property, and for me to have to tear them down would be onerous to do that. It would cost a great deal of money to do that, besides the great deal of money I've already invested in them. Any questions?
Questions from the board?
How are you located relative to the high school?
Well, the driveway is about 250 feet long. So if you take the driveway down to Forest and hang a left, I would say the high school is probably a couple hundred yards down.
And then behind you?
Behind me is a development that is managed, I'm not sure it's owned by, but it's managed by town properties.
Is it commercial property, or is it?
Yes, sir.
residential? Okay.
And along the back edge of my property, it's pretty heavily wooded. The front edge of my property is pretty heavily wooded.
You said that the person making the complaint, it's not one of the neighbors like immediately in front of you on Forest Road, is that correct?
Well, if you look at that picture right there, if you go up the driveway, his house is the one to the left. He's sitting over there.
I see.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing as there are no other parties in favor of this appeal, I'll call those who are in opposition to the appeal. Would you please step forward? Sir, I don't believe you were sworn in.
No, I was not.
Please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Anthony DiPuccio. I live at 7625 Forest Road. Mr. Klein already pointed out where my residence is located. I have some information that I do want to present to the board, and I had actually talked to Mr. Gary Powell this afternoon about that, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he said, not only did he say it would be, he said it would be acceptable, but I'd have to be here to do that, because I was not planning on being here, because it's a long story. So I have 5 copies for the board, if you would like to receive them.
Of what? 5 copies of what?
Of what I'm going to present tonight.
Does the board have any objections?
No, nope. I don't.
Not really as much material as it would appear.
Okay. Do you have pictures with you? Thank you. I think I might have.
You have 2 here?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
So I'm going to walk you sort of through the analysis that I went through after I received the notice that there was a appeal application for this piece of property. So there are 5 general topics I'm going to hit and get into some of those more specifically. I'd like to start with a clarification of or an update on the staff history that was reported on this site. I have lived at that location for, I don't know, almost 40 years. I originally served on the Hamilton County Zoning Commission, and then I also served on the Anderson Township Zoning Commission, and I also served on the committee that went through the township adopting their own zoning. And I can't remember when that was, but I'm thinking it was around 1987 or something like that. So I have just a lot of knowledge because of my having lived there for so long on it. It is correct, Mr. Klein is correct, he did purchase this piece of property at a sheriff's sale, and obviously it went to the highest bidder. The things I'm stating because I believe that they relate to the factors that you need to consider in this appeal process. Any buyer would do their due diligence and find out what potential problems there are with the property before doing that. And I don't feel that the lack of due diligence is a factor to consider in this situation. As the staff report indicates, these structures were very visible on many aerials, excuse me, and a simple call to the Anderson Township Zoning Commission or reviewing their files would have revealed that there weren't zoning certificates with those structures. And one interesting part about this is that even in your own zoning requirements that non-compliance that was created prior to a current owner is not a mitigating factor in your considerations. So although the house was constructed in 1941, the history on this is that it was part of a much larger lot that now includes what's called the Southampton office complex, office condominiums, and those are to the west of Mr. Klein's property. That was a zoning case. It was case number 1-83. It was called MedPro, and that was when the county had zoning in the process. It was before, obviously, the township had taken over. At the time that zone change was made, one of the compromises that came about was to leave the existing house, the 7621 house, in place and provide a lot for it. The lot, I believe, is probably, and the house is probably in compliance with zoning regulations, because they would not have allowed that lot to be cut out at that time without having the proper setbacks. And I tried to indicate that during case 17-2017. And I believe in my own mind that I think the reason that it wound up coming into a non-conforming status is because there just wasn't accurate information provided about the setbacks. That's history now, but it does have an impact moving forward. I'll make this pitch again because it impacts this particular case as well. That reliance on cages is not a good thing. It's not sufficiently accurate for the purposes that the Zoning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals, when they're dealing with these. The accuracy is just not there. It's a great mapping tool, it's a great for preliminary information, but in terms of when you start getting down and measuring setbacks, it just is not going to be accurate enough to do that. And I had that verified in talking to the cages folks as well. So next topic I'd like to, so I don't think the information presented is accurate, and I'll go into that a little more. Notice of hearing, you can read what I have there, but the quick summary is that I don't think the notice of hearing requirements in terms of time requirements were met. The application for the variance came in pieces, and the last piece was actually not received, as far as I could tell, from review of the zoning files until March 23rd on it. The other aspect of that is that the zoning resolution has no definition of day. The only definition it has is business day. And if you go by the definition of business day, the notice would not have been sent out in time. Parties of interest is the next topic. In reviewing the mailing list that was used, there were at least a number I noted, just in quickly reviewing it, that are no longer property owners there and haven't been for some time. They are shown as, others are shown as existing property owners on the current Hamilton County Auditor's site. So the letter to the applicant was sent on February 16th from the township. And in reviewing the file on the township files on that, the letter was not signed. There was an attachment reference in the letter. It was missing from the file at the time I reviewed it. Sarah thought she knew what that was and tried to recreate it, but I'm not sure anybody really knows what was sent. So I don't know what that information is. Sarah thought it showed setbacks, or thought it showed, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, thought it showed where the front line was, where the side yard was, and that kind of thing, but without any particular dimensions associated with it. So the as-built application for the variance was emailed in on March 14th, and a cages-based plan obtained from the Hamilton County's Auditor's website that was dated March 23rd, 2018, was submitted that same day, apparently, and stamped received that same day. The email that was sent didn't document there were any attachments, so I assume there was nothing else submitted. The Anderson Township consent form was sent as well. It was another requirement, as you know, consent to view the property. That was sent March 22, 2018. So the period from beginning February 16th, the applicant had 20 days to submit to this board an application. And that application was not fully received until March 23. And I don't believe that that meets your 20-day requirement. And I don't deal with the zoning requirements every day, so as I'm running through these, if I'm wrong, please let me know. So those are kind of the time requirements. In addition to the time requirements, and I'm probably repeating stuff that you already know, is that the BZA has other requirements. So the applicant needs to be the owner of the property. I think that probably has been met, although there are various different names that have shown up on different files in the township files. One of the other requirements was that 10 copies of the supporting information be submitted to BZA. I saw nothing in the township files to indicate that that was done. Doesn't mean it wasn't done, it just means there's no documentation, at least that. A clear and concise statement of all the facts and reasons for granting the appeal as contained in the resolution, and specifically in section 2.12D. That statement is required, and required is the word that's used, to include the references of the zoning resolution, and this requirement was not met. The applicant has the burden to show that it meets the zoning resolution, and I don't believe that this is done in terms of this appeal. There is other requirements that basically I'll run through. I'm not going to run through every one of these, but really they deal with accurate information being provided to the BZA, so they have accurate information so that you can make your decision. Accurate information was just simply not provided. You have behind you what was submitted, and I can tell you that at least for the 8x10 building, it's nowhere, it's much closer than 25 feet. You can look at these aerials that I sent you. You can kind of leaf through them. This one was just to give you a sense as to where my property corner is. It's where this pole is sticking up here. And over here is this, so you go 25 feet this way, and that's where that back property, the other back property line starts. My property line goes much further westward, 25 feet more than that. These aerials, what I have titled A and B, they also, I tried to indicate where the 8x10 building is, just, and there's no more than just an indication, is there's really questions about the level of accuracy on where these things are located. And so I'm not sure how I can assess it. I'm not sure how you can assess it when there's a question about the information that's provided. Landscape plantings or screenings. Everyone has made that to be a significant factor, putting it forth. But there's nothing in the staff report that suggests that a landscape screening or buffer be maintained if you would approve this variance. There's no description other than what was provided tonight, wasn't previously, as to, you know, what are these buildings, what are they, what can they be used for? And then other things I had listed there is that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that a variance is not substantial because the accessory buildings already exist. And by the way, I apologize for the typos. I was putting this together pretty quickly. If that were the case, then any application for a variance that involves an existing structure would not be qualified as being not substantial. I can't get my head around how that logic works. As I said, the structures are not over 20 feet away. There is information out in the field. There are markers on the property lines that could be used as a start. They're probably not enough for the township's staff to measure, get a more exact location. The staff talks about the essential character assessment and cites that, you know, they've been repaired, and they have, I will admit that. And this, getting back to the significant landscape buffer, but there's nothing in the staff report saying that since that is so significant, it should be included as a condition if this board decides to grant the variance. The staff report doesn't address anything on height restrictions, architecture, maintenance of landscape buffers, the building elevations, which were brought forth here tonight a little bit, relative to the lot and adjoining properties. And these are conditions that I know this board has considered in other similar cases, both in terms of existing structures as well as proposed structures. And other than some general words about the significant expense, the cost to remove or move either one or both of these structures, there's really no documentation on that provided. I did stay in here that I would not be here tonight, or unlikely. It's a long story, but I'm here. And I'm still open to working with the BZA towards an agreeable solution on this. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those questions to the best of my knowledge.
So what's your agreeable solution?
Well, if I had accurate information, I could maybe formulate that.
Well, interesting. You seem to have a lot of detail here.
I cannot go out there and tell you, I cannot go out and measure and then give that information to you to tell you exactly where those buildings are located.
Okay, but what is it that would be agreeable to you? I guess I'm just trying to figure out, so what you want the township to do first is measure everything and confirm what the location is?
I would like to know what's actually out there and where it is, in terms of putting it down on a plan
I think the
and seeing
pictures
it.
tell you what's there.
The pictures don't,
My eyes tell me that
your
they're-
pictures tell you what you see.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I see.
Looking at it on a plan view is entirely different, though, and seeing the relationship to other structures. You don't have dimensions there. You don't know how far it is. I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't say this to Mr. Halpin, but well, let me put it to you this way. If you had to go out and enforce whatever you approve on this, how are you going to do that if the information that is first given to you for the approval is not correct?
Well, I guess I'm trying to figure out why are you having a problem with this? Just because of technicalities, or?
No.
I don't understand the problem.
So one question, I think, is...
Based on your location, given where these items are.
Right.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out. I don't understand. What you've given us in this letter is a lot of technicalities, a lot of somebody didn't get their paperwork in time, the township did not document it correctly, nobody's gone over and checked everything out. I'm just trying to figure out what the problem is beyond that, beyond the detail that you have on this.
Beyond that is that
What's your real problem here?
The situation has changed out there, that Mr. Klein, and he has every right to do this, has cleared...
He does? I'm just questioning
Well,
you.
let me finish. He has gone out there and cleared a lot of vegetation, and he has every right to do that. It's his property. But when you're saying that nothing has changed, it's been there for all these years, it has changed. It is more visible than it was before. And then on top of that, the staff report says, well, there's a substantial landscaping buffer. Well, I would ask the first question, what is that buffer? How wide is that buffer? And I don't think anybody really knows at this point. And
Substantial, they said.
well, that's very descriptive, and if somebody has to go out, if I had to go out, you had to go out and say, I want you to enforce this. If I were Mr. Klein, I would say, looks substantial to me. You may look at it and say, well, I don't think it is substantial. And that's a key element in zoning is the enforcement aspect of it, because otherwise you're on very unstable grounds.
So exactly what are you asking us to do?
Well, my first sentence says I'm asking you to deny it until all the...
Deny what?
Deny the variance request until all the facts can be gathered.
And the variance request is to allow these buildings to continue to be there?
That's my understanding what the variance request is, yes.
The buildings that have been there since 2009?
Approximately, I assume so, yeah.
And one even maybe
before that, yeah.
And when you moved into your property, were those buildings installed while you were in your property?
I assume so, yeah.
Or were they installed after you moved into your property?
They would have been installed after I moved into my property.
Okay. And at that time, you didn't come before the board?
They weren't visible to me.
Okay.
I had no way of knowing that they were installed at that point.
Did you say that you looked it up? How long did you say you looked
About
it up?
40 years, 1979. I think that's right. If I do is that right?
Yeah, 40 years.
Okay.
So let's go back prior to Mr. Klein's purchase of this property of March of last year. The dynamics that have changed for you is that what's been cleared here, and I don't know how recent this aerial map is, but...
It's not very recent.
Okay, so there was a lot more buffer. You couldn't see prior to
Correct.
this purchase. You
Correct.
had a sheriff's sale, so this property
Correct.
was probably gone, was vacant. It was probably in poor shape, a lot of vegetation, and there was a buffer. So when you look out in your backyard and you look, and you couldn't see, you probably see the home, but you're saying you couldn't see those two buildings back there. So since
That's
this
correct.
purchase, I don't know what it looked like before. Certainly the house, the main house, is significant investment, looks like it's been put into it recently. It's been obviously cleared, as you state. He's already stated those two buildings, investment to be made to update and modernize and into those two buildings. And now that Mr. Klein owns the property, you can see those buildings back there. That's your primary concern, is the ability to see them?
Yeah, let me say something. I believe Mr. Klein has put a lot of work into the house, too. Okay? I'm not denying that. And his ownership of the property has nothing to do with my objections. It's not related to his ownership. It's related to the change in condition.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
So the visibility of those, one or both of those buildings is your primary concern?
Correct.
Let's say we go backwards and address how the paperwork was submitted, the distance from these buildings to the property line, greater detail, the timing as you've clearly communicated here. It still comes down to maybe an acceptable solution, I'm putting words in your mouth, would be to add, assuming we have all those criteria met, create or add some buffer that those buildings, or at least one of those buildings, is not visible from your property.
I would be willing to consider that, yes. Can you excuse, I just need to get a drink of water.
On this one picture here, whose tape is that pink tape? Is that
That's my tape, and it was put there on advice of legal counsel.
Is that a surveying tape?
That a surveying tape,
Did you have a surveyor put
Yes.
that tape in?
Twice I had the surveyor come out and,
Is there a report to that effect?
I can...
Usually surveyors give you a report, don't they? I think.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. I have one copy of the first survey that was done. I believe I got one copy here.
But where this property tape is, this
Yes.
line,
Yes,
is, your house is up here, is that correct? Up here along the street?
correct.
7625.
Yeah. And so I don't know if I can believe this based on your letter, but this says it's a 250-foot run.
That's correct, and I think if you flip back through some of those other previous exhibits, you see it's 250 feet.
Okay, so that is accurate then?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And then what you're saying is this 25-foot line up here on the property is not correct?
No.
So where is that other building, the little house?
You see, generally, you see where that 00, I can't remember, I can't read it from that, 009 is? Yeah. It's somewhere in that area, and that's about how close it is to the, you see it there? Yeah.
Okay, so that's within the 25, it's in that
Yes.
25-foot thing. So
Yeah, you can see, yeah, if you look at the drawing.
was that the first building put in or the second building?
I don't know what the schedule was in terms of which one came first. I wouldn't have any way of knowing that.
So what's your suggestion, I mean, based on the request that we have in front of us?
Well, I think, Mr. Graff, is that correct? I think he was heading down the right path.
A buffer.
Yeah, and to answer the question about the tape, yeah, it is surveyor tape. I had the surveyor come out twice. Just about that. That's the first one. I had to have him come out a second time because that northwest property corner was dozed over, and Mr. Klein ran a driveway over the corner, and I had Surveyor come out, surveyed a second time. What you're seeing is a second-time survey, and I could have had the surveyor just drive the property corner stake right through the asphalt, but instead I paid him to give two different, there it is, you can see it there, two different points on the property line off the asphalt with a hope that Mr. Klein and I could work out some type of arrangement. But that's not happened. He's generally been non-responsive to certified letters and other things.
So on this view
I'm
here-
sorry, and that has nothing to do with this case.
On the view here, it looks like there's a planter there and then a property stake to the right of that.
Correct, yeah.
So you're saying the stake to the right is
Is
actually the
property
corner of your property line?
Pretty close, yeah.
I see.
It might be a little further out than that.
Well, is it surveyed or not?
Yes,
So that's where it is?
yes.
Thank
There's two survey points there. You measure 5 feet off of those two survey points and you find the property corner.
So the rod to the right of the planter is the corner of your property?
Correct.
Thank you.
So what we don't know, other than the KGIS view, what that distance of that one building is to actually to his property line, to the, whatever that lot number was behind it. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Do we have anything that shows that to 7817 to that address?
I can't remember what that address is, 76...
It's the one on the other side of the road
Right,
coming in.
right, north of my,
Their side
yeah.
of you.
And that property owner is not disputing the location of that building?
He's not disputing. I don't know if he understands the situation or understands what the zoning requirements are. I can't speculate on that, whether he...
What we do know is he's not here.
He's not here.
Yeah.
Correct. And I believe on the mailing list, I think that name was correct. I think it was the current property owner. That's 7617.
So if a variance is approved, then everything stays as is. If a variance
Correct.
is not approved, then are you suggesting that these buildings then would have to be destroyed?
I don't know what the process is from that
But-
point on.
If I'm looking at your letter, you tell us all about our process. You see what I'm saying?
Up to the appeal of the zoning process, I don't know what the steps are after
Well,
you
I thought
finish doing your decision.
I don't know. You don't tell me what you want.
Well, Mr. Graff and I were just discussing that.
A buffer.
Yeah, some sort of vegetative buffer might satisfy.
Seems reasonable.
And the buffer that we're discussing is a buffer, are we talking a buffer?
Vegetation buffer?
Well, between both buildings, we have two buildings in question. The one you seem to be calling out here is the one closest to your property with, in that 25-foot zone that's dotted on this property map showing.
The playhouse.
Yeah, specifically, the reason I brought that one up is as an example of just having more information on it. I didn't delve into investigating the other one to the north, which is, I didn't investigate to see whether the dimensions on that are correct or not in terms of its location. To me, the 40 feet looks like it's probably low. If you look at the 109 feet of that one south property line, it looks like it might split that approximately in half.
So,
Yes, okay.
are we talking about two separate issues here? Because the driveway itself
The
is
dri-
not...
The driveway's not an issue.
So-
It's not an issue
For
here.
clarification on the driveway was installed without a zoning certificate originally. We received a complaint, we went out and issued a zoning certificate based on where the applicant told us that he put it. Mr. DiPuccio had a survey done, and it was determined that that one portion is in fact on his property. based on Gary Powell's recommendation and Paul Drury's recommendation, it has been determined to be a civil matter between the two. So we're not here to discuss the driveway in any way, just the two structures.
And I sent a letter to Paul to that, or email, I'm sorry, to Paul to that effect, that I'm not asking the township to get involved with that. That's a civil matter. Mr. Klein had called out the county sheriff. They said it's a civil matter. It looks to, their conclusion was, it looks to me like his property corner, you ran over his property corner. So I was very clear with Paul on that. The only reason I provided him that information was to explain that, you know, he was given this information about here's where a driveway is, here's where a driveway that's already in place is. And if you compare that, what was submitted for the zoning certificate, to what's actually out there, they don't match up. And Paul responded back that, and I understood what he said about that east property line, that, well, he didn't really address the issue of whether it matches up or not. The only thing he said was that there's no front yard setback requirements on driveways, which is true, but that wasn't my issue on setbacks. So, Mr. Halpin, can I give you any additional information that will help you in terms of answering your question, or?
No, I think you've helped me enough.
Okay.
I think I got enough information.
Any further questions for this individual?
Just quickly, so it seems like when we boil all this information down, it's really just a buffer issue for you.
I can live.
I mean, the property
Let
stuff
me-
aside,
Go
the
ahead.
driveway.
Yeah.
Not being.
That's not your issue.
That's another issue,
Yeah.
so we're not discussing
Correct.
that. It's just the visibility from your lot.
Correct. So, can I go down that pathway a little bit?
Sure.
I'm sorry to keep you guys here so late. So then the question comes, okay, a buffer, if that is a solution, how much of a buffer, where is it going to be located? And all I'm saying is, I'm not sure I can even tell you that, because I don't have good enough information to be able to figure that out.
The challenge for me regarding that is I think that's a situation that you and the property owner need to come to an agreement. I don't know how this board designs or makes suggestions that you can agree to that the property owner may or may not agree to. And he may then withdraw the variance. I don't know how to go down that process. Typically what happens is somebody comes to this board with a recommendation, and we decide upon that recommendation. So I don't think we're here to decide what that buffer looks like, or what it is, or whether it's acceptable to you, whether the dollar amount or what is being spent. And for us, the power is when you can get with the property owner and decide and come to an agreement on what that is, such that you guys come here and say, you're in agreement to it.
Well, let me sort of address that and go back to what I said. If I had good information, I could probably come up with my suggestion, or my suggestion or my proposal on it. I don't have enough information based upon what's been submitted. I don't have good information based on what's submitted. I mean, I'd be more than happy to do that. I'd be more than happy to sit down with Mr. Klein. I've told you I've been open even with the driveway. I could have just gone in and put the, I'm saying this because I want to demonstrate that I am open to it, and I have tried to be cooperative. I could have just had the surveyor go in and put the property corner right through his new asphalt. But I thought, well, you know, that I would have had every right to do that, but maybe once he sees where the property corner is, we can work something out. And I had sent him a letter saying either remove it or provide me an alternative. And
Well, we've already determined that property line has no bearing on what we're talking about. To me, the question prior to, we think what we're suggesting here is you two sitting down and coming up with an acceptable solution for what that vegetation should look like, what that buffer looks like. I hear, seems to be some question about truly where that line is, where his property line is with respect to 7617. Because it sounds like it's possible, if that line is far enough back, there might not be space to put vegetation between that building and the neighbor in front of him, which could present an issue in itself, which case he would enter into it as the neighbor at 7617 about their involvement to discuss vegetation on their property.
You just said what I guess I was trying to say, that I can't tell you that I want a 10-foot buffer, because if the building's within 5 feet of the property line, that's not going to work. I can't remember what the dimension was. Was it 25 feet in the application, I think? 25 feet. So, yeah, so a 25-foot buffer would be great, but if the building's not 25 feet off that property line, then, you know, I can't propose a 25-foot buffer.
I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Okay.
Have either of you approached the property owner at 7617 to discuss this?
No.
It would seem to make sense in my mind. Because I'm just speaking personally as a property owner, you know, there was discussed earlier about clearing property, and I have that currently going on behind my house where somebody bought land, they cleared the land, there's a lot happening back there. They clearly showed where the property line is, and they put vegetation between the end of my property and their house, and they showed, and it's great. I think it added additional buffer to what I think is a beautiful house behind me. It's not my property. And they put a buffer in, and I was cool with it. So from that standpoint, regardless of where these lines are, you engage 3 property owners to come up with an acceptable solution. It seems like all this goes away.
I mean, I think that's a possibility, yeah.
At this point, too, it might be best to call the appellant back up and see what his stance is, and if he's amenable to that type of agreement. Maybe there's even a potential that another case we penned until next month, they come back with an agreement that they both agree we can condition the approval based on that.
Because the options we have are, we can approve it, and there's no buffer. We can try to determine what a buffer should be, and then you probably don't want us to do that either. So we're trying to help you guys out, I think, and come to an agreement, but you know, if that can't be reached, we'll have to
rule one way or the other.
Yeah, we'll have to
Make a decision.
Yeah, we'll determine.
That's certainly reasonable, and you know, you do obviously have the authority to impose conditions, including a buffer, but I'm just telling you from my perspective what I know on it, and like I said, it would be a mess if you went in and said, let's say you said it was a 25-foot buffer, and there's just not room to put it there, then that doesn't solve anything, other than just make it more complicated moving forward.
And if these drawings are not accurate, too, I mean, that's one reason we can reject the application, because we don't have enough information to accurately determine that a variance should be granted or not.
Just one other suggestion, and I haven't verified this, is that I would, and I'm going to say guess, that because that lot was cut off from a larger lot, and because of the requirements that were in place at the time, that they had to have a survey out in the field conducted, and they probably had to put pins in each of the property corners for that new lot. Very standard, not just standard, it's required.
But to find those pins would be the challenge.
I don't know. I had a surveyor find mine, and add a couple. Yeah, and honestly, you may get lucky and go out with a metal detector and be able to find them.
Any further questions for Mr. DiPuccio?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Sarah, thanks for your getting the information to me.
Mr. Klein, do you wish to come back and address the board?
Yeah, I would.
Please.
You know, we're talking about a buffer. First of all, Mr. DiPuccio can't see those buildings from his house. On the driveway, on the north side, on his side of the driveway, it's heavily wooded. I cut back about 5 feet Mr. DiPuccio does no maintenance on the landscaping. On the back end of his property, as you can see, all that, and that's just been cut back. Give it a year, and you won't be able to see anything. Okay? As far as the small building is concerned, there is quite a bit of vegetation and trees between the house that you see on the right and that small building. And those people have been there a long time. They've never complained about it. I speak to them on a semi-regular basis when I see them. No problems at all. Mr. DiPuccio cannot see the small building. He cannot see the larger building. If Mr. DiPuccio would take time to tend to his property and he cut it all back, then maybe we would have an issue. But right now, the rear end of his property, you probably have, even after all the cutting I did, you probably have 4 to 5 trees that are 40 to 50 feet tall that are dead. Some of them are leaning towards my power lines and towards my house. And he does nothing to maintain his property. From my perspective, this is sort of like the first hearing that we had when we added on the addition to the top floor. Mr. DiPuccio was here. He complained about sanitation problems. He couldn't pinpoint anything, but he tried to hose up the hearing no matter what. Mr. DiPuccio makes a habit of doing this on a constant basis. What I really object to, because I'm thinking about moving into that house, my wife likes it, okay, is that he utilizes Anderson Township organization resources to harass people. He has called the fire department on me 3 times. And each time the fire department says, "You are fine." And finally, the assistant chief, who I think is becoming the chief now, refuses to make any more calls if Mr. DiPuccio calls again. Okay, because they have to come out with a loaded truck with people, which is a dangerous situation, and look at what the complaint is. And this is constantly going on with him. It has nothing to do with those buildings or they're offensive to his site or anything else. That's just the way he is. And I've come to grips with that. And I'll tell you a funny story. If you travel east on Beachmont towards 8 Mile, there's an Episcopalian church on the right-hand side, St. Timothy's. And they have an electronic message board out front. And about a month and a half ago, I'm driving down to Home Depot, which I do a few times a day, and the message board said, "Love thy neighbor." No exceptions. And I, looked at it the first time thinking my situation, and I, just laughed. and finally, about the 4th or 5th time, I said, you know what? I'm going to try that. Because loving thy neighbor has nothing to do with your neighbor. It has to do with you being a better person and making yourself a better person in that regard. So I am trying to do that. If this meeting had taken place a month and a half ago, I would have brought an attorney here. He would tell you the corner on the driveway that he says I'm overlapping, it's a pre-existing driveway. It's been there 30 years. Okay, we did not expand its scope at all near that property line. And in speaking to the attorneys, they said that there isn't a court in the state of Ohio, if you took them to court, they wouldn't grant you that piece. That piece of property that he's talking about is about this long and this long, it's a corner. That's it. Okay? Cut it in half, that's his property that I paved over. From my perspective, this is a waste of Anderson Township's time, it's a waste of my time. And there's no way I'm going to plant anything besides that growth of honeysuckle that he doesn't maintain. There's no way in God's green earth. Do you have any questions?
No questions from the board? Mr. DiPuccio, did you wish to quickly address?
Yeah, a few facts were left out. It was not a pre-existing condition. I had the survey done in July that I handed to you that clearly showed that there was a pin there. The driveway was not over that pin at that time, and but it is now. And the second thing about these trees is that actually I do have a landscaping plan on it, and I've already gotten a quote to remove these trees that are of concern to Mr. Klein, but are no way going to fall on his power lines. The honeysuckle you see there, and if you can see the power lines, those are all on his property. The power lines are actually lower than they should be. It's hard to see it there, but they're probably within, one's a cable, probably within 10 to 15 feet of the ground. And that's because he had a large tree, which you can see there on the left-hand side, that fell over and has been there for 6 months. He's not cut it up, he's just left it there, and that pulled the lines down. It didn't pull them down all the way on it. So I say all that, and then I'm going to say that really has nothing to do with this zoning case. And that's why I didn't bring it up. So I don't know how else to respond to that, and the only reason I wanted to respond to it was to get the truth out on it, so it doesn't go into the record as being unchallenged. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman.
Board, thoughts?
Do we need to close the public hearing first?
That's one of my questions. Do we want to close it down?
Or do we have more questions?
No, I'm okay.
I guess I have one question. If we do extend this for another hearing, do you feel that agreement would be reached between?
I don't know. I can't speak to that. I can only tell you that I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to give it a try, more than willing to give it a try. I think I indicated in my letter that, I'm willing to try to work something out.
Mr. Klein?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
If we pended a decision on this variance, do you think you and Mr. DiPuccio would be able to come to an agreement in terms of vegetation buffering or something to?
No, I really do not, Mr. Cyan.
Okay.
And all he's doing is delaying me doing something with that property. I've waited 30 days now to do something, and that's just the way he is. Okay? And so there's no buffering to do. Have any of you gentlemen visited the property?
I did.
Did you see down the left-hand side what kind of buffering we're talking about?
Well,
you got to be an ostrich with a 10-foot neck and periscope eyes to see those buildings.
Of course, my focus was the buildings themselves, and
I understand.
And I didn't know at the time. I don't know if I didn't check that. I didn't know at the time. We're looking at this before vegetation grows. Certainly in the wintertime, just like anything, honeysuckle especially, you're going to see things much more than you would, when the spring and summer roll around and vegetation grows. So looking at it now, clearly you would, it depends on where you're standing, anywhere on the property, you would see a part of a building, you'd see a color, you'd see something back there. If you go back a month from now, the likelihood of seeing something is less. But again, I did not walk over any of the properties to see.
But you can see by the picture on the small child's house, you can see the vegetation behind it.
It looks like most of that's
that
honeysuckle
vegetation
and
hasn't been
trees.
touched. Okay? That's it. He can't see it. It's simple. You can't see the other building back further in the property. So I have to really question the basis for the complaint, okay? Particularly since nobody has ever complained about these properties. I find the timing to be very curious, honestly speaking.
Anything further?
Can Mr. DiPuccio see those buildings from his property?
No.
Do you want a motion to either keep the public hearing portion of this?
I'm open.
It sounds like we're ruling on it tonight.
Mr. Chair, I move that you certainly come on up and please come up to the podium so we get on.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Maybe a compromise, maybe not, is that if accurate information could be provided on the actual location of those structures, number one. And number two is that, and I'll put it this way, is that then if they're 5 feet off the property line, if they're 2 feet off the property line, that if a vegetative buffer of, say, I don't know, at least as high as what's existing there is maintained, I'll withdraw my objections. You were asking me about a specific proposal, and so it's kind of a little loose, but not exactly loose. So do you want me to run back over that, Mr. Haber, in terms of what I said, or?
Well, you can run over that. I'm trying to wrap around my own head about your 2-page letter here and all of the things you pointed out as staff as having been a basis of well, not negligence, but the basis of a variance, and now you're coming down to the essence of what I think this body has been asking for from the very beginning of your testimony.
You had asked me, and I think Mr. Graff had asked me, and maybe Mr. Halpin had asked me, would I be willing to compromise? And I've said from the start, yes. And then the next question was, what might that look like? And so I've been thinking about what might that look like? What might get us to that?
So restate that again, please.
So if accurate information can be provided on the location of the buildings, okay?
Okay.
And that a vegetative buffer along that eastern property line would be maintained to the same height, and because we don't know what the width is, to whatever that width is, that setback is, then I'd be willing to live with that. What I don't know is whether how that meshes with the zoning requirements, because the staff report was all built on, 25-foot separation, et cetera, if that makes sense to you.
Well, Mr. Klein has already said that he's not willing to put a buffer in there, so I don't know that we can address point 2 of your request.
Okay.
Can you see these buildings from your property?
I can see some of them from in my house, and I can see them when I'm out in the yard. So it's not, I'm not trying to be evasive on the question. It's not an exact yes or no. And to answer your, I'm sorry.
You have to go, do you have to make an effort to see to see these buildings?
No, I can stand in my yard.
Casually, as you glance around, you see them?
I can stand in my yard right now and see them. As Mr. Graff said,
Because of the current weather.
the current weather, they're more visible than during the summertime, obviously.
Can't see them.
Yeah.
It seems like these structures were put up a while ago.
Correct.
Is it just the sheer nature of the clearing that has now caused you to see them?
I think that's a fair statement, yes.
Clearing would be, if we're looking at this picture, the clearing would be on the wall that we see from there towards the road that would create additional visibility. But it would obviously make sense if somebody's clearing his property. I don't know how much, I'm guessing this entire property was had a lot of, probably all was cleared. You can see a tree stump there. What dead, alive, what have you, was cleared to make the property more attractive. In the course of that, it created more visibility from your vantage point.
And let me repeat what I said before, that Mr. Klein had every right to clear that. It's his property. But we're talking about a non-conforming buildings right now. And there is a relationship in terms of how that impacts.
It's not like you have an issue with the buildings, you have an issue with the visibility of the buildings.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it from that perspective, if I can't see the buildings, I can't see the buildings. So I'm trying to come up with some compromise, but I know you guys still, you got to do your job. So I understand that as well.
If I hear you correctly, you're asking for a survey of his property.
I'm not certain, I don't know. I don't know whether it would require a full survey or not. I just don't know that. I can tell you when I did my first survey, it was, I can't remember this now. I think it was around $300. And the reason I had the survey done originally actually was because there too, I mean, a valid, I'll say it myself, you may be thinking, you make a valid point that I could put up my own buffer area.
Back to my example, my neighbor behind me.
Yeah.
If he wasn't going to put a buffer up, I was. He saved me the money.
Okay.
Just saying.
But he did he have a non-conforming use? No.
Wasn't an issue.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate the job.
Mr. Klein, did you have anything else to say?
Mrs. Cyan, I'm afraid to tell you the truth. I'm trying to listen to say to no.
Board?
Do you want a motion whether or not to close the hearing?
Sure, let's start with that.
Mr. Chair, I move that in this case we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Graff?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
Did I see the pictures? Yeah, some more.
So with the public hearing now closed, the board will deliberate the case amongst themselves. There will be no further questions from the audience. You're welcome to stay and hear the decision or find out this decision if we make a decision within, I guess, a day or two, probably next week then, next week, Monday. Probably be Monday.
Monday or Tuesday.
But you're welcome to stay as well.
Could you go back to the picture where the white car is? Okay. Now, is that going, that's the high school behind that white car, is it?
Correct.
Okay. So,
That's the view that Puccio has.
That's the view
I'm
The
sorry.
public
I'm
hearing has
sorry,
been closed.
There's no more public testimony.
Gentlemen, thank you. Have a good evening. Go home and have a good day.
So the area to the right of your screen is Mr. DiPuccio's yard.
I am in favor of granting this variance for a number of reasons. Stating staff's findings. In addition to staff's findings, that the structures have been there since 2009, so they have been there for the last 9 years. And there has been no exception to their existence over the last 9 years. That as a result of the appellant having cleared vegetation where it could have died on its own, that these have existed for that length of time, and that the property owner, and I don't know what that address was, but it was the address on the other side, was notified of this public hearing and did not state any, is not here and did not state any objection to it, recognizing that the appellant has upgraded those buildings from some earlier condition, that the property in question will not yield a reasonable return without the variance because those buildings have existed for that length of time, that the variance is not substantial, again, because those buildings have existed and due to the size of the property. The essential character of the neighborhood is not going to be substantially altered because they have existed for that length of time. And then the rest of the conditions here that I think staff has adequately stated. So my motion is in favor of granting the variance.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
I'll just add that I second a lot of what you already said, so I won't go into more detail of my opinion, but I do think the homeowner has done a lot for the property, and I think that speaks a lot to the variance, to granting the variance.
Okay. Do you want to add that as a friendly amendment?
Oh, I thought this was still open discussion.
Oh, good.
Everything.
Amen.
Well, though clearing vegetation would potentially expose the building more, there was investment put into the building to make them more attractive. I don't know what they look like prior to this owner doing that work, but certainly the buildings do not, they look structurally sound, and they don't in their, outside of any vegetation, any view, they don't appear to be an eyesore to the average person.
Right. Yes, let's make sure that in our motion that we do reference the fact that they have been improved.
We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Graff?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
Okay.
So that was technically the straw vote, and then we need the full motion. So
Okay, so we need to,
yeah, like saying what
But I
conditions you want.
okay. So we'll need board will need a full motion, including any conditions that we're going to impose as part of the approval of the variance. So that was our straw vote.
That was our straw vote based on deliberation.
Okay.
Now we need the motion, including any conditions that you want to put in place, whether they be the staff conditions or...
I'm sorry, that was the straw vote for?
Moving into making a motion.
Into making a motion?
Yeah. If that makes sense.
No.
Okay.
We approving and journaling right now?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We need a motion to do that. Right.
We need a motion with the conditions that you want into the resolution.
Mr. Chair, in case number 4-2018 BZA, in a variance request to allow 2 existing accessory structures to be located in front yard where accessory structures are only permitted in the rear yard, per Article 5.2A7 of Anderson Township zoning resolution. I move to journalize per the staff findings with no restrictions based on a document received March 23rd, 2018.
We're not journalizing at this point in time.
Oh,
We're just
I'm sorry.
making another motion.
Motion.
Just friendly amendment.
I'll second.
Any discussion? If With a motion and a second, would the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Graff?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. With that, we can go into recess while the staff prepares the resolution. Thank you. Back in session to review the proposal.
Do we have a question about item 1? Do we know that for sure? Is that? Okay. Okay.
What was submitted by the applicant?
Can we add after completed on that number 1? Been completed since 2009.
Do you want to remove the 20 feet from the property line portion of the statement?
Well, we got to go over the... No, I would leave it. I mean, we have...
Better go close, present. Right.
Is this?
Generally, the applications are presented under a sworn, you swear to tell,
Yeah.
information is accurate and correct, so we could rely on that, I would think.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah, my question to the staff was the application is provided states that you're providing to the, this is almost like a sworn document, so everything you're providing is true as far as you know, and that we could rely on that, and if it's not, then that would invalidate this.
But it's a survey, so it could potentially be all.
But we're basing it on his information, which we're deeming to be accurate, and if he
Right.
intentionally was inaccurate, then that would go against him.
Right.
So my point being that we could keep that over 20 feet in there, and if there were an issue, if it were reported incorrectly, then it would, we could go back and withdraw this.
So what are you saying, Paul?
Basically that the application, when you apply, put in the application, I don't know the exact terminology, but it says, you're attesting that this is accurate as far as you know, and if he intentionally was inaccurate, then this would invalidate the resolution as well. So even with a footage in there over 20 feet, in this case, he gave us 25 feet, so over 20 feet, we're still somewhat accurate to that, but if he were inaccurate, if it were less than 10, 5, whatever, then we could invalidate this resolution.
I guess.
Well,
Is that dimension important to the case?
That's what I was thinking. I'm not quite sure that it is.
Yeah, I don't think it would change it, well.
If we took it out.
I'm okay with taking it out, too.
Yeah, I'm for taking it out.
Also, should the first part of the sentence say the variance is not substantial since the accessory structures have been completed since 2009?
Just
Not
work
already?
com- just remove already.
I've been insisting.
Well, whatever, yeah.
Is that better?
Because the home.
Yeah, because
We just had to get rid of the word already.
yeah, the buildings are under considerations here, and they have been completed since 2009.
Okay.
I can go down.
Is there Okay, so is there a comment about, maybe that follows this, about the updates to those buildings? The investment made in the buildings? Essential character?
We can put it under the essential character.
You see
There we
number
go.
2?
Yeah, there we are.
The
Okay.
accessory structures have been be repaired by the applicant since his purchase of the property and are now visible from Forest Road. There's also significant landscape buffering between the applicant's property and adjoining neighbors.
Is the word landscape or is it vegetation?
It's up to you.
I think they're the same. Originally, it was landscape. Maybe vegetation now. I'm okay.
I can go down.
Yeah.
March 12th.
March 23rd?
Should it be the 23rd?
Well, it says received.
Okay.
Received March 23rd.
I don't know that item 2 is even pertinent, right? There's nothing to be constructed, correct?
So delete that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back up to the page above that.
How far up?
How far up, Jim?
That's fine, I'm sorry. Number 5 is what I was looking for.
Anything else?
No.
Good. Mr. Chair, regarding case number 4-2018 BZA, I move that we approve and journal our decision.
So noted. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Do we have any discussion, further discussion? Seeing none, would the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Mr. Haber?
Aye.
Mr. Graff?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Any further business for the day other than signatures?
No, the next meeting will be on, where is it? May 3rd.
Mr. Chair, did we want to give any further direction to our first case as to information that we needed, that we might be able to help staff with?
Good advice. Are you going to send out any further notices to the residents?
We will send out another notice. I don't believe we send out an inquiry notice, but it'll be the same people that we sent the first notice to will receive the second.
And I suppose, would it be possible to emphasize that documents need to be submitted before the hearing and then?
We can add it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think there was some confusion as to that, and that's why the documents came today. So,
yeah.
Is there so many days before the hearing, 10 days, or with that, I mean-
We usually send out your packets
the Friday before?
the Friday before, so
Yeah.
usually
We can
10
ask
days.
for
We
them
can
by
ask
then.
for them 14
10 days?
days. That way staff has them, and then we can make any adjustments as
Yeah.
needed.
Some of the items you received tonight, you're just going to scan and?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Do we need to pass those out tonight, or would that just go in the next?
I was just going to put them in the next packet.
Okay.
That way all the members have them.
Yeah.
Is there, probably both for the board and for staff, regarding that earlier variance request that was denied?
We don't have record of it, but we'll go on a hunt. Because we have files of Hamilton counties downstairs. And see if we can find it, but it's not in our, we go through our whole zoning system
Mhm.
for previous variances, and
Okay.
we didn't see it, so.
That's the one that's 35 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so-
before Anderson Township zoning, so.
Hamilton.
So it would be
Hamilton
downtown?
County.
It would,
The county did our BZA cases before they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
But do we have those files then? We
Yeah.
have the files that are here, I guess.
I mean, it was brought up in testimony today that they were using that as a precedent.
Yeah, so we should
And
try to find it.
if we can, I think that would be helpful. If, and I know that there may be some discussion as to whether or not we should include that or not.
I think we can at least look at it. It's a good
Good.
advice.
Okay.
Would give us maybe, hopefully,
Yeah, or if you tell us
additional
no record
information.
was found.
Right.
Yeah. Any other business for the board? Other than a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.